When did a feeling of we need to get out of here immediately save you? My mom's bad feeling might have saved me as an infant. She was walking with me in a stroller down her suburban neighborhood street. She says she started to feel a tingling feeling like she was being watched. So she decided to turn around and head back home. A few streets later she noticed a car driving slowly behind her. The driver, a man, starting at her and me. She starts walking a bit faster and notices he drives a bit faster to keep up. So she gets really scared. Before she can start running, this is the 90s and she didn't have a cell phone. He rolls down the window and tells her not to run or stop because she's being stalked by a coyote. He saw her safely to our doorstep and then pointed out the coyote, who had followed us half a mile and looked rangy and desperate. It had been slipping from brush to brush looking for an opening. So glad for her intuition and the stranger's help. Edit. Thanks all for the awards and fun conversations. My dad is a truck driver and has always told me if you are on the interstate near a semi and smell burnt rubber, get away from them because they are about to blow a tire. One day driving to work I smell burnt rubber. There was a semi next to me so I sped up to get ahead of him. Next thing I know I see a huge crash in my rear view with one car going airborne and flipping. I called the accident into 911 and then watched the news and papers the rest of the day. Thankfully no fatalities, but it was nasty. The semi blew a tire and the car next to it in the middle lane swerved to avoid the tire fragments and hit the car in the far lane causing it to flip. I would have been right in the middle of it all. Greyhound left me in Santa Ana at 3:00 AM, told me to wait 4 hours alone for the next bus. Normally I'm very selective on when I call Ubers, but for some reason, something told me I needed to leave right away. I find out my hotel is only about 15 minutes away. 4 hour wait. So I call an Uber. Uber driver picks me up. I get in the car, tell him something along the lines of, man, they wanted me to wait 4 hours and the station is closed, WTF. He says he's glad I called him instead of waiting for the next bus. I ask why. He says it's a dangerous area and a few weeks ago another girl decided to wait for the next bus and they upped and robbed her. Nobody found her until the station opened up again the next day. Now I always travel with pepper spray. What just seemed like a bad storm had started. My ex then decided to play with the dog out in the backyard in the rain. I got a weird feeling about how strong the winds were, and despite being called crazy I told my ex she and the dog needed to go down into the basements for shelter with me. Within 15 minutes half my roof was gone. Apparently the storm was a derecho, which I'd not even heard of before that. Not a get out of here but I can't leave this like this moment. My GF and I had just picked up a bunch of metal fence posts and stacked them in the back of her car. As we neared being done I had a flash of panic, realizing that the points were aimed right at us if we got in an accident. So I turned the whole pile to be cockeyed so it wouldn't be dead on. On the way home we hit construction. We stopped at the giant flashing traffic light. The guy behind us didn't. We got rear-ended by an SUV doing 60 plus. I instantly had that same flash of panic and looked over at my GF. She was fine. I looked down. I'm fine. Look in the back. The fence posts are firmly wedged into the sides of the car after being slammed forward by the rear end crumpling. I'm 19. Buying weed with a friend. We go to some seedy apartment in the Bronx with a third guy. Third guy wasn't really my friend. Kinda like a childhood bully. We get to the building and walk up a few flights and there's 3 guys in the stairwell smoking crack. These are our dealers. I'm uncomfortable as hell. One of the crackheads tells me to stop being such a little bitch. Third guy chimes in and says if I'm going to be a little bitch I can leave. So I leave. Friend comes with me. Days later we find out the crackheads jumped the third guy. Took his wallet and phone. Beat him up pretty bad. Needed his jaw wired for a few months. I'm a little bitch. But I still have my phone and teeth. Took my friend out for a drink. First time she had been out since having her daughter 12 weeks earlier. Had a round, then I went to the restroom. Came back to find her having shots at a table with this random dude. Random dude looked at me and I felt flayed alive. Nothing in his eyes but malice. I grabbed my friend's hand. Said loudly, "We are leaving now." We left immediately. I went back the next day to pay the tab we walked out on and the bartender told me that same man was arrested for attacking a woman outside of the bar. I was walking home from 6th form one day and saw a car following me along the street. I was about 17. Edit. Misremembered my age. Got a really bad feeling, so I hopped on the next bus with the plan to change directions and head home at the bus depot down the road. On the bus, I got a text from a guy who'd stalked me for years on and off, with a picture of my school taken just then and the names and addresses of 2 of my friends. I freaked. Finally told my parents what was happening. Reported it to the police. He'd driven over 100 miles to try and grab me and my friend and had just missed us cause I hopped on the bus and she had gone home early. He got 2.5 years in prison, suspended with orders not to contact any of the girls involved. Immediately broke that order and got another 5 years on top. I'm really glad I got that bus. Lived in a rough place and have been robbed many times before. Usually a bunch of guys asking for spare change then threatening for your wallet. Anyways, I came out of a club at 2 AM or later and waiting for a bus in a deserted area with a friend. See a bunch of dodgy looking guys you could tell were up to no good. I instantly get the feeling, but rather than run and have them chase me, I walked straight to them with a bit of a crazed look and asked them for spare change. When they said no, I insisted. They left us alone. I'm not a big or threatening guy by any means. Somewhere there is a comment from a guy saying he and his friends were just hanging out and some dude who had been waiting at a bus stop suddenly beelined for them and asked for change with a weird look on his face. He didn't even look like a beggar and gave off this weird, nervous energy. I was riding my bike during a huge storm when I was 10. There was this huge, recently built brick concrete wall right beside the sidewalk where I was using as a racetrack. I was having a good time and suddenly I felt that "get thee out of here," which I did. The next morning as I passed by the place I was playing previously, the entire wall had collapsed. A couple years ago, I was walking home from the bar at 1 AM. I'm a young woman in her 20s, so this was instantly stupid. But I wanted to save money avoiding an Uber, and was also drunk, so I wasn't thinking straight. I'm walking down a main but dark street, and then a pickup truck driving by slows down next to me. 2 men look at me and the passenger asks, "Hey, do you need a ride somewhere?" I lie and say no thanks because I'm expecting one in a moment. They said alright and drove off. I watched them drive down the street and then, a ways down, I saw their brake lights light up. There was no stop sign or stoplight. So I just assumed the worst and thought, I've got to get out of here. I ran into a tiny parking lot to my right and hid behind an outdoor vending machine. Moments later, the 2 men pulled into the lot and circled it, clearly looking for me. When they couldn't find me, they drove away. I waited a few moments until I decided to call an Uber. I was getting a beer with a friend and he brought along his friend. When we left, I felt very drunk despite only having 2 drinks. They wanted me to come to their hotel as they were getting ready to go to a concert that night, but I made the excuse that I needed to get home because I think I left my oven on. My beer was 100% tampered with. My vision felt like I was in a tunnel. I got home in an Uber and immediately threw up and continued to do so for the rest of the night. Not my feeling, but whatever. It was at the Goose Fair in Nottingham in the early 2000s. I was there taking pictures for my art course and my BF at the time fancied himself as a bit of a hardman. Liked to make out he was trained or whatever. Anyway, after about 20 minutes he made me leave. Said that was about to go down. Huge eye roll. Whatever, dude. Okay, we'll leave. I see in the news the next day that a 14-year-old girl was shot dead there not long after we left. Not me, but my mother. She was on a business trip taking a taxi from the airport and she noticed the driver wasn't taking the route usually taken, as she had done this multiple times before. She asked him first out of curiosity. Perhaps there was a road closure or something. The guy simply mumbled something and mostly ignored her. Then it's more apparent they weren't headed toward the hotel and instead away from the center of the city. She got more and aggressive, eventually demanding he stop as he kept ignoring and mumbling something. Finally she got loud enough and threatening enough that he did pull over and she got out. She had a cell phone but smartphones weren't a thing yet. She was able to call a taxi service and get someone else to pick her up, and sure enough they were headed nowhere near her hotel. Now maybe this guy was hoping he could take an ignorant tourist on a joyride and rack up some high fare. But it sure has the feeling of something far more malicious in the making. My buddy and I snuck out when we were about 14. Roughly 10 at night. And we went to check out this little field by my house, all surrounded by trees and had a little creek running through it. I really wanted to see it lit up by nothing but starlight. About 1/4 of a mile away I got the feeling of imminent dread. We got a turnaround, dude. I got a bad feeling. AWW, come on booby fass MG. You're just scared. Dude. I'm telling you. You can go there but I'm turning around right now. Alright fine. ESSY. He replied. The next day we found out there was a mountain lion attack that killed a dude's 2 dogs he was walking. Where was it? About 1/4 mile away from the field. When was it? About 10:30. Roughly 15 minutes after we bugged out of the area. I have no doubt my subconscious recognized a big problem that I hadn't consciously noticed. This was back in 2019. I was in college and there was a really nice guy in one of my classes. A week or two in we had to work together on a small project and I was pretty excited about the opportunity to get to know him. After speaking to him, though, I got a really bad vibe from him. But nothing specific that I could put my finger on. I lost all attraction to him and knew that I should keep my distance. He approached me a couple of times after the project. But I made sure to be pretty cool distant. Though still polite. A month or two later, same semester. Our professor, Mr. Baldwin, announced that the guy had been arrested for murdering a girl he had been dating, another student in our college, and apparently it was an extremely brutal murder. He gave us the number of the detective investigating the case in case we had any info to share. Edit. Thanks for the wholesome award. I forgot your name now. But I have it in the comments. Back in 2019. Me and some friends were in downtown Vancouver watching Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, at a pub. Vancouver lost and things on the street got a bit rowdy. My friend wanted to stay and wait for things to come down, but I just had a bad feeling and said we should hop on the next bus to Kitsilano. On the way over the bridge I looked back and saw trails of smoke from burning cars coming from the city. A huge riot ensued and it was absolute anarchy all night. Up in the woods. About 2 AM. Having a very large bonfire in midwinter. There were probably 7 or 8 feet of snow where it wasn't packed and my friend and I were the only two sober. After about 45 minutes we both looked at each other at the same time and went, something is wrong. Neither of us could quite explain it because we hadn't seen anything. But we knew there were animals in the woods. Grizzlies, wolves, and bobcats are all known to be there but generally leave larger groups and fires alone. We managed to convince the roughly 15 drunk guys to head back to the trucks a mile away. As a group. Knowing at least the sober friend had a gun on her and could use it. We got everyone into vehicles and everyone shipped back to town eventually. When the guys who didn't believe us went back out in the morning to check that everything was cleaned up. And found the tracks of a pack of wolves that had been circling the clearing. I was at a house party in high school and things were getting very rowdy. Tons of people just trashing the place. And I just had a bad feeling. Told my friends we should leave but none of them would listen. I remember going out to my car and as soon as I got in the cops pulled up. I ducked down and waited for them to get up to the front door and just drove off without them even noticing. Several of my friends spent the night in jail or hiding in the woods that night. I slept in my comfortable bed. In high school. At a very shady friend's house. playing cards in the kitchen. One of the house residents comes running through and out the back door holding several illegal items. He's followed by the 2 roommates also carrying evidence with them with 2 cops hot on their heels. The cops chase the roommates out the back door, but one cop stops briefly and tells all of us at the table don't move before heading out the back door. We're all stunned and look around for a couple seconds before all 4 of us, without a word being spoken, jump up and run out the front door to a neighbor's where we lay low for like 3 hours until all the noise passes. Don't move. Don't have to tell me twice. Leaves immediately. I hope that I'm not late, but one day I was taking a hot bath as I love to do, but when I was laying down in the tub chilling I started to feel so relaxed that I was slowly getting sleepy. Pretty normal thing in a hot bath, but then I remembered that a water heater fueled by gas installation was acting weird for a couple of days. I got scared because I realized I could get carbon monoxide poisoning. I tried to get off the bathtub but I just fell down on the floor. I crawled naked out the bathroom and I took a deep breath of the fresh air. The next couple of days I couldn't move out of my bed because of an extreme headache, which as I read later was one of the symptoms of the monoxide poisoning. If I would fall asleep there I would be dead now. Sorry for my inglando and spelling. Stay safe, what? Stayed in a motel in Gary, Indiana during a snowstorm. I woke up about 2 hours after falling asleep and just decided to leave right then after an exhausting day. I was tired but had this compulsion to leave all of a sudden. It was tired but wired. I got in my car and headed out. The snow stopped and the plows were out, but it was slow going. Turns out someone murdered another poor traveler 2-3 doors down. Knocked on the door of someone who would answer and killed them and stole their in their car. Not sure if I dodged a bullet, but I'll never stop in Gary again. I had passed Amy Bishop, UAH, a biology professor, on the 3rd floor on her way to the faculty meeting where she executed 3 of our professors and attempted to kill more, as well as herself. She had always seemed weird and gave me chills. I was on my way out of the building, collected my things on the 1st floor from my previous lecture, and drove home to my apartment. I missed several calls on the short drive, having missed so many. The first I returned was to my mom, who was hysterical. She just kept saying you're alive. You're alive. I was bemused by what she meant. I said, should I not be? And that's when I learned people had been trying to check on my location due to the shooting happening. Edit. I suppose it didn't save me as I was not a faculty member, but it's the first thing that came to mind. It was extremely surreal to get home and realize so many people suspected I was dead. I was in our backyard with my son. He was playing on his little playset that sits under our very large, very old trees. It started to rain lightly and get windy. Being from Seattle, I don't normally care if he plays outside in the rain. But I said to my kid, and this is very out of character for me, we need to go inside now, before the wind takes you away. He came inside. Just as the door closed behind him, a branch snapped off the tree and landed on crushed the playset he had been standing on 3 minutes earlier. If he'd still been there, it would have fallen on his head. When I was 18, I went to Greece with a friend. We were walking to the bus stop and a taxi pulled up and offered to take us to the airport. We figured it would be quicker, so got in. It was supposed to be like 30 minutes to the airport, but about 10 minutes in I realized we were still in residential areas and not a highway or anything. I looked at my friend and it was pretty obvious she was worried too. So the next time we were at a stop, we both looked at each other and then opened the doors and ran out to a nearby gas station. Ends up he was taking us in the exact opposite direction of the airport. The man who worked at the gas station ordered us an actual taxi and we safely made it to our flight. On a trip to Berlin, my partner and I were going to get the famous Mustafas kebab, and on the way we stopped in a small shop to buy some beers. She got a feeling and said let's leave now. So we did. And we weren't 10 steps away when some guy started screaming in the shop and throwing crates of beer bottles at people. Out the door. At shelves of other bottles. It went from 0 to 100 in seconds, so we were lucky. We had delicious kebab within the hour. Was on my first solo road trip to the US when I was around 34, male. Straight. Stayed in a fairly remote Texan campsite and decided to go for a little trek. End up hitting a parking bay. It's about 4/5 PM. Nobody else around. Then some guy in his mid-40s rolls up in a van. Starts talking. All seemed normal enough until he asks if I want to go for a ride and a smoke with him. Politely declined. Then he said a bug went down my top. Without realizing I lifted it, and he then commented on having nice chest hair. Said I need to get back to my group and started walking in the opposite direction. Dude then starts reversing and getting a bit aggressive and insisting we go for a ride. I just got straight back to the trail and started running. No idea if he was just some strange friendly guy, a potential thief, rapist, serial killer, or if I accidentally stumbled into a meetup place for gay men. Glad I didn't stick around to find out anyway. Not me. But when my mom was a teenager, she started to date this bit older guy that my grandma had a really bad feeling about. Not just a "I don't like that boy" for you thing, but a "stay away from him, something's wrong" feeling. She tells her not to see him. Forbids her. Prevents her from going over to his house. One night she sneaks out and goes to meet him. He said it was really important that he see her that night. She gets to his house later. Swarmed with cops. She found out he was luring young women to his house and killing them, and had uncovered several remains buried in his yard. I would say she learned her lesson. But my mom is a sweet soul. She's too trusting and gullible because I think she sees the good in people. Luckily nothing like that has happened again though. Edit. Update for everyone asking. It was in Florida in the late 60s. She said his name was Ozzy, probably a nickname. Doesn't remember much else about it. She was a wild child and dated someone else after.